Hello, everybody. One little correction, though. I actually ended my military career 2 years ago. Free at last, free at last. And that's what gave me the time to now do a Master of Public Health degree at University of Texas Health Science Center here in Houston, where I live. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will get going. So suicide is a topic that we really don't like to talk about. For many people, it can be very uncomfortable, but sometimes it's thrust upon us, and it becomes very real when somebody that we know dies by suicide or has a suicide attempt, or even when we hear of a celebrity who's died by suicide. Think of the death of Robin Williams, whose death impacted so many people around the world. As we talk about this, I want to just talk about some assumptions. First is that in every presentation that I give, I know there's going to be some people who have lost friends and loved ones, and some who've had thoughts of suicide will be watching. Some of you may be uncomfortable with the topic, but you're here and you want to learn. And by learning about suicide and being comfortable talking about it, we become better able to minister to others with thoughts of suicide. We won't be shocked when somebody raises the topic with us. We will be ready to listen to them. And that's what so much of suicide prevention is just listening to the hurts of people. Language that we use can be alienating. And so there's some phrases that we want to try to avoid. In particular, the phrase commit suicide, which makes it sound like a crime. And so I'd encourage you to talk about somebody who as having died by suicide, or even we use it as a verb that they suicided. We can talk about people with thoughts of suicide or people with lived experience of suicide. We want to avoid terms like successful suicide or completed suicide, and just talk about dying by suicide. And I've provided a handout on safe messaging and a couple of other handouts from CDC and another one that I'll go over in a bit. For me, the topic really hit home as an Army chaplain. And in my first period as an Army chaplain, my first 10 years from 1986 to 1996, I had one soldier die by suicide, and I did no suicide interventions. Then I got out, I was back in civilian ministry and campus ministry until I got back in 2009. And in that second 10-year period, it became really the dominant part of my ministry, with multiple suicide interventions, multiple ones each month. Sometimes a couple months I had as many as 5 suicides in a week in my National Guard unit. And I became a suicide intervention trainer for the Army. And that's what led me to study more. And that's now the focus of my Master of Public Health studies. And I think each time of all those lives impacted, of the soldiers I knew, of their family members who I had to comfort. So this is not an abstract topic, but is very personal for me. And suicide affects every age group, but we're shocked when we see headlines like this: lawsuit blames schools for bullying 8-year-olds suicide. Here's some data from the Centers for Disease Control in the US, or the CDC. Suicide is the second leading cause of death between the ages of 10 and 34. So that's our youth and our young adults. Some people today ask whether the COVID pandemic has increased the numbers. And at this point, we see no evidence of that. Yeah, there's some anecdotal talk, but in fact, it takes us 2 years to get the numbers. So we won't really know for sure for another 2 years whether there was any significant uptick. But as we'll see again in another slide, those who die by suicide, that's one fraction of the suicide issue. There are multiple times as many people who have thoughts of suicide. Among our middle school and high school students, 10 to 15% of youth have thoughts of suicide at some time. Sometimes we hear about suicide rates by profession. And you see some of those that with the highest rates, and these are in terms of how many deaths per 100,000 population. That's the standard that is used. So the highest among people working in mining or gas and oil, construction, uh, maintenance, repair, agriculture, but no profession is exempt. I know 3 Seventh-day Adventist pastors who've died by suicide of different ages. So no one is exempt. That's a point that we really want to emphasize. But even though we talked about youth, which is the group at highest risk? It's adults over the age of 45, in particular, middle-aged men and women from 45 to 54, and men 85 and older have the highest rate of any group in the US. But 80% of all deaths by suicide are among those middle-aged men and women. If we look at gender differences, men die by suicide 4 times as often as women, but women engage in suicidal behavior 3 times as often as men. And what's the difference? Because men tend to use more lethal means, firearms in particular. Women tend to use either suffocation or pills. One place where we see a difference with this, where the difference is not as extreme as in the military, where the women are as familiar with firearms and are as likely to have them as men. If we look at some of the risk factors, one of the real important ones is a history of suicidal behavior in the family, or an individual has had prior suicide attempts. Maybe they might start out with trying to drive their car off the road, overdosing, and then they'll escalate to a more lethal means such as firearms. Family history is important. Now think of one family, the Hemingway family, Ernest Hemingway. 6 of his children and grandchildren have died by suicide. And his granddaughter, Marielle Hemingway, has done a documentary about what it meant in her family. So we do see patterns like that. Mental health problems are often present, especially depression, but not everybody who dies by suicide has depression. And not everybody who has depression has thoughts of suicide. Substance abuse, especially alcohol, I see that in my soldiers. There was often a bringing together of family issues, mental health issues, access of firearms, family history of suicide and trauma. So these risk factors don't exist in isolation. I mentioned veterans, of course, that's in the news a lot, increasing veterans suicides, and the number that's thrown out used to be 22. Those were partial numbers, but now we talk about 20 a day veterans who have died by suicide each and every day. As we look at the numbers, the greatest increase has been that dark blue line, those younger veterans, 18 to 34 years old. About half of them have never deployed, so we can't say that it's a result of their combat experiences. More often, in the cases that I've dealt with, it has been loss of relationships, being overwhelmed, not getting promotions, some things like that. But if we overlay it with the trend lines for youth in basically the same age, here it's separated out into women is the bottom one, men is there. You can see that the military and veteran suicides for that same age group are much higher, going up to almost 45 per 100,000. So this is one of the things that Tracy and I have been talking about, is how in our youth and young adult ministry, we can keep in mind the needs of our young adult veterans who come back to the congregation after the age of, after they've been in the military 3, 4, 5 years, and they come back and often dealing with a lot of trauma and so on. I saw Roger Wade is online. We did a training with him a year ago, our last trip before the pandemic. So we need to keep in mind that whole young adult population, especially that there are those sections that are more vulnerable, like our veterans. But here's another way to think about it, and this is a statistic that might shock you. Over 50,000 people died by suicide in the US and Canada in 2018. And in that same period, a little over 34,000 people joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church by either baptism or profession of faith. So people are more likely to die by suicide than they are to become Seventh-day Adventists. There are variations around the country. You look up at the northern New England states, you look at the far west, except especially the Rocky Mountains and Alaska. Those are by far the highest rates. The states with the #1 leading statistics: Wyoming, 25.2, New Mexico, 25, but among the native population of New Mexico, 37.9. Montana, Alaska, 24.6 per 100,000, but among the native population of Alaska, 41.2. The lowest states, New York and New Jersey, with 8.3 per 100,000. So there's a lot of variation around the country. And in Canada, we can see some statistics, similar kinds of groups, men more than women, survivors of suicide loss, First Nation and Métis communities, and all Inuit regions in Canada. There is one of the greatest epidemics for suicide among the Inuit, especially in a particular two communities. In Inuvialuit, which settlement region, which is in the northern coastal areas of Yukon and the Northwest Territories, we're looking at 60 per 100,000. And in Nunatsiavut, which is the upper coast of Labrador and the east coast, one of the highest suicides in the entire world, 275 per 100,000. And we look there at historic issues of government taking kids away from families into the 1960s, 70s, even in the early 80s, confining people to these settlement regions where they used to have the freedom, deaths of dog sleds and being confined, lots of grief, loss of culture, and one of the major public health problems in Canada. Contrast with Bermuda, another nation in the North American division, only 25 people died by suicide in the 10-year period from 2009 to 2018, a population of about a little over 63,000 people. So why? What are the issues? And this is from a CDC handout that I gave you. Relationship problems, #1. With some of my young adults, it's the loss of somebody, a girlfriend, boyfriend that they thought was their soulmate. Crises that they think are going to happen in the next couple of weeks, substance use, job or financial problems, especially significant loss, physical health problems, legal problems. And again, sometimes these all combine with one another. I've had soldiers that had multiple health problems, alcohol use, relationship issues, and the whole burden just was overwhelming to them, and they did not know a way out. And they thought this would be a way, provide for their family with at least their servicemen's group life insurance payment of $400,000 and death benefit of another $100,000 on top of that. So dealing with loss and that sense of loss, and especially just wanting pain to stop. When we look at youth, we see some other specific issues of bullying, childhood abuse, trauma, social isolation, and family violence. We can think of it as a pyramid or an iceberg, with the number of suicides per year as just the tip of the iceberg. What we can see for this particular year, 2014, it was 41,000 in the US. Almost 10 times as many self-harm injuries treated in emergency departments. 1.1 million suicide attempts. Nearly 10 million people seriously considering suicide. So if we want to make a difference, where do we want to intervene is both in helping to make life worth living, helping people with some of the problem-solving issues, but recognizing those signs of suicide so that we can tell when people are thinking about suicide and find them help. So that's where I want to talk about some specifics of intervention. One of the things I'm involved in is I'm on the advisory board for the Texas Suicide Prevention Council. And yes, it's Texas specific, but it has a lot of useful information on the webpage, especially this, the ask, there's AS plus K question mark, ask basic gatekeeper training. This is an hour-long training that you can take online, and it's absolutely free. I've given you a couple of handouts, one in English and one in Spanish, that gives an overview of the steps as well as the warning signs. And I want to go over those just briefly. So when you hear or observe some suicidal language or behavior, and we'll come to some of those warning signs, first you want to ask about suicide. You see some of these signs and you want to ask the person, are you thinking about suicide? And sometimes they might respond defensively. What? Why would you say that? Well, you've talked about these losses, about life not worth living. Maybe people would be better off without you. And often when people talk like that, they're thinking of suicide. And that's why I want to ask you that. The next step, we want to seek more information. If the person says yes, that's a good thing because, they're trusting you. And it can almost be cathartic for them because they've kept this big secret and now they're willing to trust you with it. That's not the time to launch into a Bible study, not the time to launch into reasons. No, you shouldn't do that, but rather, what made you think of it? What's going on in your life that you think that suicide is an answer? We want to also kind of see, are there other supports for them? Have they looked for help in the past? Have they had medication for mental health issues? Have they seen a therapist? Do they have physician or family members we can trust? So we want to know their story and their circumstances. The next step, we want to consider their safety. How do we keep them safe now? And that's where we look at especially their support network. Who could we call right then to bring in the conversation? We want to secure lethal means. Do they have a firearm? Do they have pills that they were thinking about taking? Can we get those from them? And keep those in a secure place while we help them stay safe and seek help. And of course, we need to know where we can refer them. So one of the questions I ask you to think about in the conversation is, what resources do you have in your community? Who could you refer somebody to? So your handout will look at each one of these steps and talk a lot more about it. The important thing is that we want to have that connection with somebody. We want to show that we can listen, and we want to do a lot of reflective listening. I hear you saying that you've had a lot of loss. You've had some fears for how your family's going to be, that you're concerned. We want to be able to reflect that back and listen sympathetically without judgment. What are some of the warning signs that might lead us to ask somebody if they're thinking about suicide? Well, it might be things that they say. They might talk or plan or write about death or dying or suicide. Expressions of hopelessness. I just don't know if I can go on. I feel trapped. Talking about unbearable physical or emotional pain. I think one friend of mine who was having lots of physical pain from microfractures from jumping out of planes for a long time. And he got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and he had a thyroid tumor, and he just didn't know what he could do for his family. And the pain and dulling it with alcohol all contributed to his loss. Different behaviors, trying to dull the pain with alcohol and drugs, trying to obtain lethal means. I knew one elderly woman who had had a hip fracture, and she kept her pain medicine and tucked that away, and would order it a little early and kind of tuck away those pain meds thinking that the day might come when she might use them. Isolation from family, just cutting oneself off, not finding enjoyment in the social activities or things that used to give meaning, giving away possessions, asking somebody to take care of something that you know is a beloved pet, for instance, saying goodbye. All of these behaviors can be signs. And then a change in mood, whether that's depression. I've talked of loss of interest in things that once had interest, uncharacteristic irritability, a sense of humiliation or shame, anger, but also sometimes a sense of happiness, relief, sudden improvement, euphoria. And why might that be? Because they've been thinking about it, wrestling about it. Now they've come to some resolution and they have a plan, and they are at peace because they know what they're going to do. Some factors that might make people more susceptible to suicide: mood and substance use disorders, again, alcoholism, bipolar disorder, and so on, history of previous suicide attempts, significant losses, job, financial, relationship, having access to lethal means. And there's a specific training that many mental health agencies offer called CALM, CALM, counseling on access to lethal means, which is a big issue, especially here in Texas. Everybody owns firearms. Among my soldiers, I'd ask, how many of you have firearms at home? And every single one of them had multiple firearms. And that's just part of the culture. And how do you ask for somebody to hand that over when it becomes kind of a sense of their identity, a sense of how they protect their family members? So that can lead to a lot of vulnerability. Exposure to clusters of suicide. I mentioned 1 week, 5 suicides in my unit, 3 in 1 battalion in an area of Texas that had a very high suicide rate. And 6 months after that, the battalion commander died by suicide as well. So sometimes we see those clusters. Also, the lack of access to supports, lack of social support, mental health stigma, unwillingness to talk about it, embarrassment, living in a place where they just don't have the same kind of mental health supports. We have a lot of communities here in Texas that just don't have adequate mental health resources. And some people might even have cultural or religious beliefs that say that suicide is an acceptable way out. Other people, on the other hand, may have the sense that they'll go to hell if they die by suicide, and that becomes a barrier for them. But these are some of the risk factors that establish that vulnerability. At the same time, there are protective factors, things that can help protect us and nurture and sustain life. Having effective clinical care, having a mental health support, having the ability to, having the basic problem-solving skills that help you work through difficult issues. Having connections, a network to peers, schools, and social organizations, faith-based communities. Faith can be a very strong protective factor, that it gives meaning and purpose to life and gives you a community of support that you're connected to. Except in the case of LGBT youth, their religious connections are often a risk factor rather than a protective factor. As I look at these connections, that was one of the concerns I had for my National Guard soldiers. I had about 1,200 scattered from East Texas down to the Rio Grande Valley, out to West Texas, and one chaplain for each battalion. And I had 3 battalions empty, so I was having to cover about half of that brigade. And we would only see them once a month. So I began to look for what are the resources in our communities that we can draw upon, that we can make connections with to help support our soldiers in between the times that we actually see them, encouraging my soldiers' platoon leaders, just as I would consider youth leaders, follow the social media accounts of your youth and young adults. That's often where I would find out that there was a problem. Somebody would tell me, hey, did you see so-and-so's Facebook post? They're talking about life not worth living. And probably a majority of the suicide interventions that I've done came because one of my non-commissioned officers or a fellow soldier saw something in social media or heard something that just wasn't quite right. But what we want to do is we want to kind of mitigate against those risk factors and build up and strengthen these protective factors. Some specific issues that we want to touch on for schools and pathfinders. And this is a resource that I think every school, every youth director, every education department in the conference should have. By Terry Erbacher, Jonathan Singer. He's been the president of the American Association of Suicidology that I'm a member of. And Scott Poland did this book 5 years ago, Suicide in Schools, a practitioner's guide to multi-level prevention, assessment, intervention, and postvention, the whole gamut. Now, postvention is probably a term that might not be familiar to you, but that's looking at all those things we do to care for somebody after some suicidal behavior or for the survivors after a death by suicide. So this is a very practical resource, and it has lots of assessment tools. And at this URL, tinyurl.com, suicide-risk-resources, are a lot of the electronic resources that go with this manual. They're free, includes a lot of risk assessment forms and some things about what schools need to be doing to help have a crisis plan in place. Some special risks for schools that are also associated with, that also apply to our youth programs. One, we can't forget about our adult leaders. And they're also part of our network. But thinking of those youth who are isolated, who are bullied. I can speak from experience as a kid who was bullied when I was in youth programs, and I never had a youth leader or one of my teachers in church school or Sabbath school ask me about it or address it face to face. I hope you have no kids that could ever say that. Reach out to them. LGBTQ youth, that's a critical issue, very high suicide issues there, and high stress, and a feeling of not belonging in our Adventist communities often. Suicide histories in the family, suicide pacts where 2 or 3 youth say, we're going to do this together. The day that I was driving down to visit the survivors of that unit, after that cluster of suicides, I had a flat tire. I stopped at a car dealership, and they told me that what everybody was talking about in that small town that day was 2 young girls who had together leapt from the roof of a parking garage that morning. And we talk about contagion. It's spreading, and that's most often, this source said exclusively among adolescents, but seen hints of it in some of my soldiers too. But those are particular things that we need to be aware of. And that's why when we're doing the aftercare, we want to be careful how we talk about suicide. We don't want to get into the details. We don't want to emphasize that. We want to instead emphasize hope and protection and care. But it's important that you're prepared. Every school, every youth group needs to have a crisis plan. When kids say things, when they report about so-and-so acting funny or talking funny, you need to take that seriously. When you ask about suicide, don't take no for an answer. You need to go back if you see those signs and say, well, I hear you saying no, but I'm concerned because we've seen these things, we've heard these things, and those are signs of suicide risk. And that's why I hope we can talk some more about this. Of course, with any minors, you need to involve the parents, school counselor, pastor, or chaplain. And here, let me put in a plug. A lot of our academy chaplains are not trained chaplains. Too often we have somebody I've seen a biology teacher said, hey, can you be the Bible teacher and the chaplain too? And I've had those academy chaplains tell me, I'm having to deal with suicidal thought and eating disorders and cutting, and I have no mental health experience. So please look at hiring chaplains who are qualified chaplains endorsed by Adventist Chaplaincy Ministries, that they have pastoral experience, that they have a Master of Divinity degree, that they have specialized training in these issues facing these at-risk populations. Of course, if you're concerned about a student, supervise that student at all times. And if they're at high risk, know where would you transport them for assessment? What are your community resources? So I'm giving you all kinds of information here because really all I can do in this time is touch on what are some of the issues, give you kind of a framework, and tell you where to go for more. The handouts that I've referred to are going to give you a lot more in-depth information, and they're also going to lead to some other resources. A couple things that you should know offhand is the suicide prevention hotlines. On the right, you have what is the US number. On the left for Crisis Service Canada. Both have texting, and often for youth, they'd rather text than call. For the US number, if you press, they'll say press 1 if you're a veteran, and that will get connected to the Veterans Administration, to their special hotline for veterans. Otherwise, it rolls over to your local community mental health agency. So if somebody in Houston calls that number, I know that Harris Center for Mental Health is going to pick up, and my friend Jennifer Battle is the director of that call center, and it's one of her trainees or one of her folks who is well trained who's going to be picking up on it. And they have connections to local first responders if they need to. They know the local resources. And it's an amazing network that is throughout the nation to be able to connect people to somebody that knows their own area. And the law was just passed. We've been advocating it for some time. As of July of 2022, it's a year from this coming July, we'll have a national number where dialing 988 will connect you directly to this hotline number. But until then, have this. I had a bunch of wristbands made up with the suicide hotline number on it, and I had a chaplaincy booth at GYC the last couple of times. And people would come and the kids would want to grab that. I said, well, wait, you can't take it until you know what it is. And I told them what the hotline number was, and they'd get a serious look and they'd say, hey, I know several people that need this. Can I take several? I said, sure. So get that information out there. A couple of organizations, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and it has a lot of local chapters. The American Association of Suicidology, I've been going to those national conventions the last couple of years, and I'm on their public health committee, and I'm the chair for the faith-based task force for the public health committee. And that has lots of resources for schools, for youth groups, for different populations, and it's kind of the first place I would direct people for looking at more resources for their specific circumstances. I want to refer back to the Texas Suicide Prevention page. And I mentioned this gatekeeper training. It's about an hour, free of charge, and it goes over in depth with some role-playing kind of scenarios so that you can feel much better equipped for doing suicide intervention. And you don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be able to solve the problem, because we're just asking you to be able to do what we call suicide first aid, to be able to recognize the signs and get somebody to help. That's what we want you to feel comfortable doing. Another similar kind of training is from the QPR Institute. It's about an hour-long training. $29.95 is the cost. They have people in many communities who can do an in-person training for your group. You can be trained to become an instructor. And in this case, QPR stands for question, persuade, refer. Same steps, just talked about a little bit differently. Another provider for training, and I was a trainer with Living Works for many years. Living Works is based in Calgary, Alberta, and has a number of evidence-based programs that were developed by faculty at the University of Calgary, but they are used worldwide. This is kind of the gold standard of suicide intervention training, and they have resources in different languages and cultural adaptations for the military, for Native populations. They've contracted with the Canadian government to do them for the Inuit population. Living Works Start is a 1-hour online interactive training, very well done, and it costs $27.95. But you can also order multiple licenses for your organization. It also has a faith-based program. My friend Glenn Bloomstrom, who's a retired Army chaplain and a seminary professor in Minneapolis, he developed this. It's 5 to 6 hours online, a little heftier price tag, $149, but it's one that's from a Christian perspective with a lot of scriptural use as well. Living Works has a half-day in-person training called Safe Talk. All of our Navy chaplains are trained in that, and a 2-day workshop called Assist, Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, where over 2 days you get to break it down and practice all of the skills. And that's offered by many community mental health agencies. I help do some trainings here in Houston with our community mental health agency, and they often get other community agencies to underwrite the cost. But if you really want to do it, that would be the program to do, the 2-day training from Living Works. Another training that's important is critical incident stress management. These courses are produced by the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. And these are what are the standard for first responders. So police, firefighters, EMTs will all be certified in critical incident stress management, both in responding to crises, but also taking care of their peers after a disaster. So they have courses in individual and group crisis intervention, suicide, psychological first aid, workplace violence, and managing school crisis. Because I did this training, I've been called upon for some local crises, including after the Santa Fe High School shooting. I've done a number of these trainings together with local law enforcement and firefighters, EMTs. And these courses are also offered by Adventist Community Services. They're part of the training for certification as an emotional and spiritual care provider so that you can work in that area with ACS and the Red Cross. So you can talk to your conference community service director for a training at your church. And pastors who go through community services, emotional and spiritual care provider certification and have a Master of Divinity can be endorsed by chaplaincy ministries as a disaster response chaplain, and we have many of those. ACS also has Pathfinder honors in areas such as disaster ministries and community crisis intervention. That one is for 10th graders and above, but it covers a lot of these basic principles of listening and knowing where to take people for help. Another resource is the Action Alliance. It sponsors a national weekend of prayer for faith, hope, and life each September, and has resources that a congregation can use to do a whole weekend devoted to faith, hope, and life, and promoting life and wellness in your church and in your community. I want to touch on postvention, things to consider after a suicide. there's a lot going on. And think of it from the perspective of a school principal or an education superintendent. You're providing mental health first aid to the survivors. You're engaging the community and the school and the family and crisis intervention. There's practical matters with the family. Things like a trauma cleaner, taking care of what happens afterwards. A very difficult thing. A principal, how are they going to know about things like that? How do you keep the educational routine going? How do you keep the school year going? Using it as an opportunity for suicide prevention, intervention training, and planning for a memorial service. All kinds of emotional responses, and some of these carry over into behavior and psychological responses, and it's trauma. And there can also be later on the onset of post-traumatic stress disorder, especially for those who are very close. So these are things that we want to take very seriously. And so therefore we ask again the question about organizational preparedness. Do you have a crisis response team? Are the staff trained in critical incident stress management and crisis intervention and suicide intervention and psychological first aid? With rituals, those memorial ceremonies and funerals, again, we don't want to dwell on the details of what happened, but we need to connect the word of God with the experience and speak hope and comfort. And whenever I did a memorial ceremony for my soldiers, I found myself drawn to Hebrews 4 and Hebrews 9, where it talks about Jesus being made like unto his brethren so that he could be a faithful high priest, so that knowing our temptations, he could intercede for us before the Father. That's where I get hope. Knowing that Jesus knows what was going on in the heart, in the mind, in the life of those brothers and sisters who've seen suicide as an answer to their pain. And I can trust them to his love and his care. Care is critical for ourselves too, as we're leaders and helpers. And because all the things that are happening to others in a time of crisis, we're dealing with it ourselves. And so we need to take rest breaks. We need to see a therapist, chaplain, counselor. We need to eat right, get exercise, and vent and grieve and pray so that we can be there for others. And that gets us to the topic of resilience. How do we, it's our ability to get through adversity and recover from it. All those things we recommend as part of a healthy lifestyle contribute to our resilience. And I hope you know the Creation Life program that comes from Advent Health. And it's a great video curriculum going over all these things about making proper choices, getting rest, caring for our environment, physical activity, trust in God, healthy personal relationships, positive outlook, getting good nutrition. This is a great program you could use in your community. And that's what I've seen and why I drifted towards public health, seeing that our wellness is not just based on our individual choices or attitudes, but on our whole environment, what we call the social determinants of health. You can find more on the CDC webpage, different areas that can all influence our well-being. And some communities don't have them. And that's where issues of structural racism, where we see that some communities were short shrifted in terms of what resources they had available and still have available. So all those community health programs that we do are contribute to this community approach to public health. And in the CDC handout that you have, I want to draw your attention to this chart that looks more at, how do these things specifically connect with suicide prevention? Providing financial support to individuals in need. There was a study released just a couple of months ago in 2020 that showed that raising the minimum wage by $1 resulted in a 3 to 6% drop in suicide rates among adults with high school education or less. These things make a difference. Strengthening access to and delivery of care, creating protective environments, connecting people with their communities, teaching problem-solving skills, identifying and supporting people at risk and preventing future risk. All of these contribute to this public health approach to keeping people healthy and safe. And that's our goal, to create churches and communities that support and nurture life, where people find meaning and purpose. And may God help us toward that end. Thank you all.
Amen. Thank you so much, Phil. Yes, we need God's help. But you know, I really appreciated how you shared with us that there are so many resources available, and we don't have to feel like that we are alone in this, that we are without help available. So for those who want to intervene among those who may be considering suicide, and for those who may be considering suicide themselves, there is help available. We've got to make use of those resources. I'd love to ask you some questions, but we're going to do that at the end of the program today. But if you have questions, again, please go ahead and put it in the chat. I want to go to our next presenter, who has been very busy for us and has been giving us a play-by-play summary of Bill's presentation. So thank you so much, Pastor Tracy, for doing that for us and for driving home those main points. But we want to go to you now. As the director of the Youth and Young Adult Department for the North American Division, you have been working and discussing this topic with your team, and other important mental health topics. And your team, and I'm talking about the team throughout the division, you're very close to this issue. So we're very thankful that you're able to be here with us today and share about the resources available through your department, and what hope we can give to our young people. So thank you so much. I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Angeline. Yes, youth ministries, our youth ministries world of even children, youth, and young adult ministries, but especially junior high, high school, young adult. Suicide prevention is a big deal for us. It's how shall I say this? It's one of the factors of youth ministries in these last days that does not go on the side. We are seeing and interacting and engaging with young people all the time who are experiencing suicide ideation or things like that, and you don't know until you have a conversation with that young person and become friends, and they feel like you're a safe person, and all of a sudden conversations lead to intervention, which is really important. For instance, these things happen at campouts, camporees, Pathfinder events, where a Pathfinder club counselor is sitting around a campfire with their kids, and they're just talking about life, talking about stuff, kicking the logs, and that's where safe places and spaces, that's where young people open up. We have that in school settings where you might be on a school retreat or you have an activity going on, and as a pastor or a youth leader in a local church, when your ministry becomes effective, where you're impacting young people and they feel safe and want to open up, all of a sudden we're in a conversation where we realize we've got to intervene in the safety of a young person, whether it's an abuse situation, a suicide situation, or whatever it might be. And those church leaders, those Sabbath school leaders, those youth group leaders, those youth directors, this is a real part of our ministry. And the reality of it is, most of our leaders don't have any formal training, or many don't even have any just auxiliary training in addressing these items. And so in the last couple of years, especially here at the division, we've heard from our field of practitioners saying we need resources, we need help. And so last year we commissioned a psychiatrist, an Adventist psychiatrist, an Adventist pastor, and an Adventist young adult who worked together to put together a specific resource that we have on our website. And I'm going to put the link in the chat. You can go directly there. If you put in oneteammentalhealth.org, it'll point you directly to our NAD Youth Ministries website, and I'm going to share my screen so you can see what we have available. We've got a 7-part series just on mental health, and one of those booklets is on suicide and self-harm. And it's what we're endeavoring to put into the hands of our pastors, our leaders, our Pathfinder leaders, youth ministry leaders. But I will share with you where you will find that on our website, just so you can see it. And if you can indeed see this, you can see the URL. I put the URL in the chat. That's really the easy one, oneteammentalhealth.org, but it'll point you to this long URL right here. If you get here, you go to resources, there's a drop-down menu that says mental health, and here's where you get to there. And it talks about John and Rachel and Gary. These are the people that put these booklets together. There's the first one is on depression, and huge topic in our ministry world. The second one on anxiety. The third one, and you can see you can download these on suicide and self-harm, and I'm going to show you that one in a moment. The fourth one on just getting help, and so that one's really helpful. The fifth one on recovery tools. The sixth one on brain training, figuring out how to reorient our thinking. And the seventh one on staying healthy. But if you click here, you can see these are free downloads. You can click here and it'll be a viewable PDF, or click here for print ready if you want to print something. If indeed you want hard copies, you can order them directly from adventsource.org. Go there and just type in mental health resources, and adventsource.org will have them. But let me show you what this looks like. So the one on suicide and self-harm, it looks like this when you click on there. And it's probably 30 pages. I don't know exactly, but the table of contents really covers your life is still worth living, getting help for suicidal thoughts. Then we go into what you feel like, or when you feel like self-harming. Another one on creating your personal safety plan, and so on. You can look at it and check it out. But this is something that a youth professional, educational professional, a teacher, it's resources within this booklet that you would use to just acquaint yourself with steps and processes, thinking processes. And so that's what's available. That's the primary resource that we are using right now in the world of youth ministries, young adult ministries in the North American Division. So Angie, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pastor Tracy. And I'd like to also invite those of you who may have resources that your churches have worked on. Please reach out to us so that we can share those as well. This is a very important issue, and I think we are better at addressing it when we can do it together, and together show support for our young people and for all those who may be struggling. Well, we want to go now to another segment of our time together, which is breakout groups discussions. And this is a very important time because this is your opportunity to, in a small group, talk about what you've heard. We do have a facilitator ready in each of these groups who has a question that they will lead you in discussion. So spend this time talking together, processing what you've heard, making it practical, and think about how ministry can be impacted, how your ministry can be impacted. But let's go to our other group leaders and go through what was discussed in each group. We're going to give you just brief highlights of what was discussed. So our first group leader is Paul Lehman, who is our coordinator for the Collegiate Advocates for Better Living program. And Paul, you were discussing a question about the signs that someone might be thinking about suicide. So what did your group talk about?
Oh, that is kind of where we started. And then there were clearly some very good thoughts on that. And thank you to Bill and Tracy. Your presentations were astonishingly good. Thank you. Again, it was kind of reiterated what Chaplain Bill had said about, people making statements, giving things away, withdrawal, and even the fact of the euphoria and peace. These are things that they had noticed maybe with some people. One of them had very close to them within their community, someone that had died by death by suicide. And even a family gathering, something to watch for, that they aren't typically themselves, I think is a kind of a key factor. We talked a little bit about if they've noticed the difference within their community, even though we aren't connected because of the pandemic. Is there something that's maybe happening? And that brought a result of talking about that we really need to focus in many ways on prevention even before we start to see these signs, to stay connected with the people within our congregations, our schools, our universities, so that we don't get to the point where we have these incidents happening. And also, Steve, who deals with the Native ministries in the Northwest, he said that in his situation, when they have one suicide, maybe within the Native community, it escalates to the next, to the next, to the next. And that prevention was crucial, and that these webinars and ministries and resources are really critical to all of us.
Thank you very much, Paul. Yes, it's great to hear from the different groups that are represented as well, meaning the different locations and ethnic and cultural groups, because we want to have an understanding of the differences that may exist amongst that as well. Let's go to our second group leader and hear from Carolina Ramos, who is our health ministry leader for the Columbia Union. Carolina, thank you for sharing with us what your group discussed.
Sure, we had a very ethnically diverse group as well. The theme that most stuck out was teenagers. Several of the leaders on this breakout room mentioned that they have had teenagers that have been through a situation where they were contemplating suicide, and the sign that they saw was mainly withdrawal, locking themselves in their room, not coming out. Their parents not realizing this was going on until a teacher identified the symptom in that child and was able to provide help. There was also, someone mentioned that there was a church member who was in a very abusive situation with her husband, and that she started showing signs of depression, and later they talking to her and becoming closer to her, they realized that she was also contemplating suicide. So in this case, the women's ministry group, what they did is they formed a small group of ladies that had non-Christian husbands, and was kind of like a support group for this, for this lady going through this abusive relationship. And they were able to help her, support her through, that process. And they were even able to get her out of the country without her husband knowing, to escape that abusive relationship. Also, there was someone that shared that they recently lost a church member due to suicide. He was in his, I believe, in his 80s. And the family member did not realize that, this was going to happen, but he started making preparations prior to committing suicide. And so that was another sign. Also, excessive sadness, recent trauma, and I'm adding these last two: changes in personality and self-harm. So these are signs that we need to look for.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carolina. And the more we're aware of these signs, the more we know to become alerted when we start noticing these. Thank you so much. And for sharing the stories of success as well, that we can, by coming together, we can actually make a difference in someone's life. Please note that Bill did post a link on the chat for anyone looking for resources for Native youth. So don't miss that too. Let's go to our next group leader, who is Dr. Lorraine Barton. She is a pediatrician and also the health ministry leader for the Pacific Union. Lorraine, thank you so much for being with us today. Look forward to hearing from your group.
Yeah, thank you. We had a really good discussion for the short time. Sylvia Saldana, a friend of mine from way long time ago, I met her, she's from Arizona. And she said that, just listening to people when they make comments like, I can't take it anymore and stuff like that. She had a friend like this, and she was able to go and visit with her and find out what the real problem was. And the lady had pills that she was planning to take, and Sylvia actually took the pills away from her and got her some help. So reaching out to our friends or neighbors that might be having an issue. Um, Savannah Carlson made some really good comments about sometimes people look like everything is going all right. So, we may be looking out for people that have what we think are symptoms, but don't forget that there's many people out there that are acting pretty normal, look like they're okay, and everything is going all right, but we don't always know what's going behind. So that makes me think about a comment that one of our other contributors, Melanie Felton, made that said, really in our churches, looking out everybody, just making friends, being sure we know people well, because sometimes we only know people very superficially at churches. I think also one of the best comments I heard was from Michael Martell. He's a youth ministries director, I think, at his church, but he's also in his lifetime been a youth camp counselor. And I think probably lots of us on this talk have been involved with youth at some time in our lives as counselors or going to junior camps and stuff. And he said that one thing that they were taught that they should look out for is even children who have problems such as bedwetting, that can lead to difficult situations. And so he was watching out for this one kid, trying to help out in his life because of this problem. He was a very severe bedwetter, and following up on this child 2 or 3 years later, this child did commit suicide. So that's something as pediatricians we unfortunately deal with a lot, is all kinds of little problems with children that have troubles in their home. It might be abuse, it might be just that they're very shy, it might be they're having trouble in school, but not all problems are medical problems. Sometimes they really are psychological, and we should not just pass them off as needing some medicine or something like that. We should probably try to become closer to these children and find out what's going on. It turned out in that case, he was being abused at home. I don't know if it was physically or just mentally, spiritually, but that's something we should think about. And I do think that especially in our churches, we should look out for the people that Bill mentioned, because we know for sure that adolescent males are in far greater risk of committing suicide if they've had a breakup in their relationship compared to girls, 4 to 1 in my experiences dealing with things like that, and for elderly adults. And so, yeah, just looking at people who've had a major change in their life. But again, it's not everybody. And one thing I didn't think was brought up real extensively, and that is diet. Nobody in our group mentioned this, but I really feel that depression frequently leads to suicide. And sometimes people are not only not eating well, they're not sleeping well. So we could just ask, how are you doing? How are you sleeping? Because a lot of these people that have depression are not eating the right kinds of food. And it really is important. That's just my take from a health perspective.
Thank you so much, Lorraine, for sharing and also emphasizing that this is a holistic approach. When we are caring for individuals, we do need a holistic approach, and we need to remember that relationships need to go more deeper, right, than just the superficial. But very important aspects there. We're going to go now to the second question, which was asking, where could you take someone who was thinking of suicide for additional help? So what kind of resources are available for you in your community? We're going to go first to Elder Roger Wade, who is the Health Ministries leader for Mid-America Union. Thank you so much, Roger, for being with us and sharing from your group.
Well, it was my pleasure. I have to say that the group that I had the privilege of sharing with was internationally diverse. when we hit this question, we actually heard about two particular resources in terms of facilities. So it was shared that there is a facility in North Carolina. We did not specifically say where exactly, where parents or even the youth themselves can go and gain help either with counseling. They can stay there to kind of be watched, to be, if it's medication involved. They have a place, a safe place they can go there in the Carolinas. Also, we had an individual who was with us from the Bahamas, and they shared that the Bahamas government had a facility that was available for the citizens of the Bahamas, that involved they can go get help, medication, support, counseling, that was available free of charge there in the Bahamas. And so it was a place where the individual who was with us shared that they gained information themselves to bring back to their local church and sharing about suicide and the options that are available there. We also realized, and it was pointed out, that it was brought out in the group about the number of resources that are available. Elder Bill, you did an excellent job in communicating that. It was heard that there are plenty of resources available and cost effective in being able to be trained and have resources for suicide prevention. And also it was brought out that there was a sense that they did not know of the number of resources that we had in the church. Tracy, with the presentation that you shared, also with the references to Advent Source having the resources available. We had a mother on with us who suffered from suicide with her daughter who took her life. And she was very excited and glad to know the resources were there, but was not aware that the resources were there when she was going through her storm. But we were very happy to know that the resources were available within the church, and even available to the church, to the membership of the church, so that there can be training, there can be resources that they can utilize in the home, in the school, and in places to help our youth in particular, and anyone that needs it. So that was brought out in our group.
Thank you so much, Roger. Yes, the importance of knowing the resources and making others aware of them as well. So we've got to let our churches know about them. Thank you so much. All right, our next group leader was Pastor Ray Nelson, who is the coordinator for our addiction recovery program. Pastor Ray, let's hear from your group, and you are muted at the moment.
All right, we had, I'd say there were 6 of us in our group, and the first person who shared was a music teacher, and she's recently, within the last year, moved to a new community, but her experience teaching music in I'm assuming it was a public school setting, but I'm not real sure. But she mentioned that there was a lot of bullying among the teenagers. Her children as well were students in the school, and so she did say that at one point in time, the school hired a counselor for a 2-year period, but that was some time ago. And we can only guess that for financial reasons, the school discontinued her services or his services. Another one of our participants in the chat room was a pastor, and he had found resources within the local county behavioral behavior department, and had gotten involved in the suicide prevention through the local county. And this seemed to be a way that he, as a pastor, was able to reach the needs of those who might be suicidal. Did mention how difficult it is with the COVID-19 and the social distancing. As to the, it plays a very important factor as far as not being able to sense the needs that a person might be having as far as any suicidal thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastor Ray. Yes, glad to hear that the resources are being used, and let's do our part in making them more aware. And in our group, that was one of the big questions and issues that our group felt was important, was the awareness, is that many people don't know that all these resources are available. So please, we can only share we can share better by sharing together. So please let your churches know about this. Even if you don't think that anybody there needs to know, still go to your church, your pastor, and let them know, here are lots of resources that are available. Can we just make it known to our membership in some way? We did have Dan, who's joining us from Australia, who shared that, part of our issue is that we still do stigmatize mental health issues in the church. And so that is a huge hurdle that we need to get past. It's something that we really need to work on. And that is something that, especially for our young people, can be very, could drive them to down that pathway of contemplating suicide because they don't feel that support for when they are struggling. So we also heard that from Joe, that the importance of digital ministry, that we have an opportunity here for making resources more available. And Yvonne working and serving there in Alaska, where that is, we heard in Bill's presentation, there is a great need there. And yet there's a great lack of resources there locally. And another thing that our group really wanted to emphasize was the need for Adventists who can provide care for individuals who are struggling with suicide or other mental health conditions. So some of our church members are looking for Christians or looking for Seventh-day Adventists who can help. So I just want to share with you very quickly that the North American Division is taking this very, very seriously. We have started what we're calling a mental health collaborative. And this is across all the departments, looking at how we can provide resources and services for mental health needs throughout the division. So please stay tuned. We will be sharing more information about that as we develop it. We have a 2-year strategy. Things will be put out. You've already heard that there are some resources already available, and we want to continue to develop resources for our communities and our churches. But we need to end here because our time is a little bit over. We're ending, but we're not ending. We're going to close our program so that those of you who need to leave can feel comfortable to do so. But our presenters are going to stay with us for a few more minutes to answer some of the questions that have come in. So we are going to have a closing prayer by Pastor Tracy. And then again, if you need to leave, feel free to do that. But if you can stay with us, please feel free to stay. Pastor Tracy.
Let us pray. Lord Jesus, it's been good to be together today. And Lord Jesus, you've been with us and you've inspired ideas and thoughts into our minds that maybe we've never thought of before. Ideas of how we can help our fellow loved ones, our brothers, our sisters, our friends, who we live among. And this day, Lord, we have specifically talked about the issues of mental health and specifically suicide prevention. Lord Jesus, even now there may be people around us who are thinking about this. And so we're inviting you, Jesus, again, to come and draw near. Through the presence of your Spirit, help us see red flags. Help us notice indications where maybe our loved ones, our friends, our neighbors, our church our church members, those around us, Lord. If there are people who need an encouraging word of hope, Lord, may you use us. Inspire us with your vision, with your wisdom, with your inspiration. And Lord, the resources, the many, many resources we've looked at today, Lord, may we take a look at these. May we go deeper in them. May we find them. May we learn. We're looking to you, Jesus, to just inspire us with wisdom, your wisdom, through the resources of others and through your Holy Spirit. Train us, teach us how to help those who are considering the ending of their lives, Lord, and bring those divine appointments, Lord, where we can encourage and build each other up in faith and confidence and trust in you. We know you're the answer to our challenges and our situations, but sometimes our friends don't realize that. And sometimes even we struggle with the faith to believe that. But this moment, again, Jesus, come upon us and bless us as only you can do, and bless those we touch and talk with and care for. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Again, if you need to leave, please feel free to do so. Just a quick reminder that the recording of this webinar, as well as the documents, the links that have all been discussed, they will be posted on our website. I'm going to ask my assistant, Phil, if you can put the link to the website in the chat right now for everybody before they head out. But just so you know, the documents that Bill referenced are already posted. So go to that link, scroll towards the bottom under the archives, and you will see the links to today's webinar. But let's go into some of our questions. I see a hand up already, and we'll get to you in a moment. Tarina, thank you so much. I want to ask a quick question that came in previously. And this, I'm going to address this one to Chaplain Bill. So from what one of our attendees, thinking about the COVID pandemic right now, there has been, as you mentioned, discussion that we may expect to see the rates of suicide to have gone up during this time. And this individual actually tried to call one of the hotlines on behalf of someone else and had trouble. It was on hold for quite a long period of time. So can you share with us, first of all, what are the expectations that someone should have when they call one of these hotlines? What should they expect to happen with that? And what can we learn about how to manage the situation during the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, with the hotlines, they have a standard of how fast they want to answer them, but because it goes to a local agency in most cases, some are better equipped than others. We had our suicidology conference in Denver a couple of years ago, and they had a screen showing live all the data of all the calls coming in, being transferred, how fast it was happening. But guess what? It breaks down sometimes. The VA was having that problem. So I'd say, follow up with your local community mental health agency that handles the crisis line and say, hey, this was my problem, and try to do that local advocacy. And for your, that's where advocacy for legislation to get more funding, public funding for these health lines, so crisis lines, so they can hire people is a critical thing. On the issue of COVID, again, there's a lot of speculation about that, but no data. And I happened to just open up Twitter, and I saw a post from my friend Janelle Cubbage. She's the director of suicide prevention programs for the state of Maryland. And she posted, what's incredibly frustrating to me about the lockdowns causing suicide narrative, besides being false, is that those propagating it never talk about the trauma of mass deaths because of uncontrolled pandemic. Do y'all think that's going to do people's mental health any good? They talk about physical isolation, but not how isolating it feels when you're following all the recommended guidelines for mitigating spread while watching people carry on with their lives with reckless abandon, showing no regard for how their actions are endangering others. So there's live tweet from one of our nation's public health suicide prevention experts, the frustration about the miscommunication in the narrative and what we should be concerned about. But as was mentioned in the discussion, being proactive to reach out to those people we communicate with. There's 6 siblings in my family, and we started an every 2-week Zoom chat. We're scattered around the world, but we said, in this time, we need to make that extra step of being there for each other and being in touch with each other. So that's an important recommendation. This is a time where we're isolated. What can we do to overcome it?
Amen. Very important. How can we find those ways of connecting, even though we may be physically disconnected? Very important. Thank you. I have a question for Pastor Tracy. I'm going to pose this one to you. One of our attendees asked the question, when we're talking about the relevance of our lives, purpose and meaning in our lives for our young people, what is the impact when we reference creation and our creator? Is that something that we can help engage them with as we're helping them find some meaning and purpose in life?
Good question, and excellent question, because that kind of falls into the idea of identity, figuring out who you are, where you're from, and all of that. And those philosophical concepts, which actually are important in our processing of understanding who we are. But let me pause a moment. Mrs. White says the most powerful thing we can share with someone is our own personal testimony, the personal testimony of our experience with Jesus or with others. And so we know, those that are youth practitioners, youth professionals, we know that the sermons are powerful, concepts are powerful, scripture is powerful. But when you start having a personal conversation with somebody and just talk about how life works for you, that's the most powerful thing you can do. By sharing your story, in church we call it testimony, but by sharing your story, your journey of how you have navigated or how you have friends that have, that breathes hope and life into people, and especially young people. They want to hear how you navigated when you were their age through the challenges you had, even though we know they're different. Hey, if you start talking about boyfriend, girlfriend stuff like you had, if you start talking about the hard times you had understanding your parents or how that worked, when you start telling your story about what it was like when you were a teenager, in relationships, in school, in life, even though it might not be exactly theirs, it is a parallel story where they can grab hope. And so these are the things we just call on our leaders to say: be friends first. Be friends with these young people and let them know you're a real person with real challenges, and maintain or carry on that friendship. Kind of like what Bill was saying here, it's the personal friendship like he had with his family every 2 weeks. It's the personal friendship that enables a young person to feel safe and journey with them. Of course, you do it in a safe way, so you're not doing just one-to-one. You've got, the 3-person rule and all of those safety issues that we deal with when working with minors. But don't discard that you have testimony from your life journey that can breathe hope into the lives of other young people.
Thank you very much, Pastor Tracy. Very important. I'll just add very quickly, we have research from Andrews University that shows that when young people believe that their body is the temple of God, that they actually have a reduced risk of risky behaviors. So that's, sexual behavior, that's using drugs or alcohol. Now, I can't say that there's a correlation with suicide, but there is some value when they understand that there is something beautiful about who they are. But very important also sharing our testimony. I want to go to Tarina. Thank you so much for being so patient with your hand up. Tarina, please feel free to unmute yourself and share with us your comment or question.
First, I want to say thank you so much for this wonderful seminar. Chaplain Cork, Pastor Wood, fellow ministry leaders, this has been wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. My question is, in light of so many suicides and millennials falling astray, not only because peer pressure and so on, but this COVID pandemic has taken a strong toll on them. Are there any talks of having a, a seminar or a workshop call? It could be like the talk, where it's just a open forum for young people to express their concerns and get a better insight on what they can do, how they can cope with what's going on. It's like, as we strive to win souls for God's kingdom, we have so many souls right here in our local churches and internationally and worldwide that are falling off.
Very good question. Pastor Tracy, I know you're doing a lot for our youth and young adults. Any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, let me just speak to that briefly. The pandemic has really disrupted youth ministry across North America and around the world. When I talk about youth ministry, I'm talking about Pathfinder clubs that would have been meeting every week on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Sunday at the local church, and now we can't get together. And it's those Pathfinder clubs where a Pathfinder leader is innovative and isn't afraid of technology and continues to take it to like a Zoom world or another another platform where they can continue to meet. Let me say that youth ministry right now in North America is in crisis mode in one sense, that especially the small churches where they aren't connecting well because either they don't have the resources or the local church just, there's not enough happening. In larger churches, a lot of them have gone to a virtual platform for youth ministry, for youth Sabbath school, for Pathfinder ministry, for other things. And so there is some sense of connection, but the connection points are super challenging. And then, of course, you guys all know this well, the whole school systems and how kids are doing school is just rocking our world and rocking our education world as well as rocking the local family. So we're in a new place that needs just people to just give hope. And so when you talk about, is there a forum, a large forum? There isn't, although every Sabbath morning we facilitate NAD Youth Sabbath School. We call it Momentum Youth Sabbath School on Zoom, on YouTube, and on Facebook every Sabbath morning, endeavoring to help a local Sabbath school that maybe doesn't have anything happen for their kids. They could watch the YouTube, watch it on YouTube or watch it on Facebook on our NAD Youth pages. So NAD Youth Sabbath or NAD Youth Ministries on Facebook or NAD Youth Ministries in YouTube. And of course, it comes on at 9:30, but that's Eastern time zone. So people watch it throughout the day and we get a lot of views on it. So that's one place where we are on every single Sabbath talking about the Cornerstone Sabbath School Connection, Youth Sabbath School, and having youth groups come on and be a part of that. That's one thing. But other than that, local conferences are doing what they can. Many of them have things happening. So check with your local conference youth department, children's ministries department, see what's happening. I know children's ministries at the NAD is knocking themselves out too with online events on a regular basis, just trying to help families stay connected and help ministries continue forward.
Thank you. I agree with you that it's important that each one reach one.
Yeah.
Mentoring plays a significant role in shaping the young people and helping them to grow and stay firmly planted in God's ground.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tarina and Pastor Tracy, for sharing on that question. Bill, I'm going to ask you a related question. What about youth supporting youth or peer support? Do we find success when it comes to the suicide when we are able to facilitate people talking to each other who face the same questions in their mind?
Yeah, those are the major approaches in like campus ministry and in the military, because as I indicated in my presentation, we can't be there everywhere, but so their friends that are in the dorm, that are in the barracks, that are studying with them are the ones who are going to see so much more. And they're the ones who are going to bring to the student counseling office, to the chaplain or whatever, the folks with with issues. And so some of the trainings that I mentioned are specifically inclusive of youth, like the Living Works program. Safe Talk is one that's appropriate for high schoolers. It's about 4 hours, and there's other similar kinds of things out there from lots of different agencies. But that's really the key thing: training youth so that they feel comfortable talking to their peers and sharing with them and identifying the issues, because they're going to see something on Twitter, they're going to see something on Instagram or Snapchat or text late at night, and that's how there are eyes and ears. So the more that we can do at each of our schools, and there are suicide issues at our schools. Loma Linda had like 3 students in 1 year in different levels of their education. Medical students are under so much stress. And the more we can weave together these networks of support. One thing that the Army has recently done, and this was a program in my last 2 years in the Army Reserve, I was actually stationed at the Pentagon as part of a research group headed by one of our Adventist chaplains, Jonathan McGraw. And we developed a program that's just now being rolled out, bringing together mental health, chaplaincy, and medicine to see, and the chain of command to see, you know, these issues belong to everybody. And Lisa Miller, who's a professor at Columbia University, who's looked at the impact of spirituality upon the brain using brain imagery research. And seeing that, you know, we can show that spirituality makes a difference and is positive. So she's going around the Army now talking about that and the importance of, she wrote a book, The Spiritual Child, about how important spiritual formation is, and using that, that's a buzzword that gets some people's hackles, but spiritual development, let's put it that way, is so important, especially for early adolescence. Yeah. Those things that are learned and the openness to spiritual things that comes at early adolescence. We've got scientific evidence that that is a protective factor. And as we've taken Dr. Miller out, she was at Fort Hood last week, and these commanders and the doctors, everybody's just, wow, this is really cool stuff. So there I kind of covered 2 different things, but in both, it's we need eyes and ears from peers, but we also need to bring these different disciplines together because we're all a piece of it.
Very important point. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have a question in the chat from Yvonne. What would you recommend for middle school aged children?
I'm assuming
Bill.
You're looking at me.
I'm looking at both of you, actually. I'm looking at both of you.
I can talk
any tips from either of you? Go ahead,
I can
please.
talk to that. And also, I don't know if Linda Coe is still on, but she may be able to speak to that too. But Linda Coe, is Linda still with us? Maybe she can speak to that as well. But let me start. Let me start here. So in youth ministries, we usually pick up where children's ministries drops off, and that's usually somewhere between juniors and early teens in regards to Sabbath school. So we're talking middle school kids is usually part of youth ministries, early youth ministries. We call it junior youth ministries. Let me speak to that first of all. One thing that we as Adventists take for granted, or we may take for granted, and that is our Sabbath school system or network. Sabbath school is the heart, and you say, yeah, but you don't know my Sabbath school in my church. Let me pause here. The model of Sabbath school is the heart of the church. It's not the worship service. It's the heart of the church. And the Sabbath school curriculum is there to help give some focus to a spiritual conversation or a spiritual topic. But when Sabbath school becomes a school for religious education, you're missing the component of fellowship in Sabbath school. And we know that Sabbath school is usually an hour long in a church. And so the moment you get the kids settled down, you're all of a sudden you've lost 10 minutes. And now you've got maybe 15 or 20 minutes for an actual Sabbath school lesson. And then you're off to something else. Embrace the reality that that's how it's supposed to work. Use 15 minutes for Sabbath school lesson or principles, but don't what makes Sabbath school boring, especially for middle school kids, early teens, or even youth, is that we as leaders turn it into a religious education block of time for an hour and we're going to make it happen, rather than also balancing it with community, connection, interaction, relationship building. And that's the heart of Sabbath school. That's the heart of church. And so in a pandemic where we don't have Sabbath school anymore, or in a church where you've got a family, one family that has 2 early teens and that's it, enlarge that Sabbath school to be multi-generational, but help those kids find connection and community in a place, in a space where it's a safe place for them. That's the heart of it. But so many times Sabbath school has died 2 generations ago and nobody has a vision to revive it into what it is intended to be. It's the heartbeat of the church. And so, of course, I'm appealing to you as Sabbath school leaders. Go online, go to the general conference, download the Sabbath school app on your phone from the general conference, and you can see every division's level of what they're teaching each Sabbath. If you're in a little church, know what the junior Sabbath school lesson is about. Or the primary Sabbath school, you got it on your phone if you download the Sabbath school app. And just be aware, and so you can inject what the topic of the Sabbath school lesson is in the middle of your connection and relationship times with those young people. Okay, I'll be quiet. I got to quit preaching.
Okay, let me address it. That sense of being a tattletale is and that peer pressure is an issue at every age, not just youth, especially in this, because in fact, if somebody confides in you and the next thing you do is you blab it to somebody, they're going to shut down, regardless of the age. In the military, chaplains have absolute confidentiality, active duty military chaplains, so that those mandatory reporting laws, none of them apply to an active duty military chaplain. And so they trust us with that. And we get trusted with an awful lot of stuff. And so what I do is talk to the person. And when we get to that point of, hey, do you want help? Can we go together to seek help? It becomes us going together rather than me telling on them. And the whole idea of calling 911 on people and bringing in law enforcement, we've seen just so many problems. There was a pastor in Killeen, Texas, outside Fort Hood, who got killed by police last week when they called for a mental health issue because it was a policeman who was not trained in crisis intervention. So I'm much more wary about encouraging people to call 911, especially if they are people of color, because we've just seen too many things go bad. But in this case, with a girl who's texting, to have that wherewithal to respond and listen, I'm concerned, and share that texting number with their friend. Share the 800 number. Kids, we found that kids and children and youth prefer texting rather than calling the 800 number. It just gives a little more safety and anonymity for them. But there are times when somebody does say, hey, I am doing this, where you just say, hey, saving this person's life is more important than rupturing the friendship. And at that point, if child needs to tell an adult that we need to call for outside help and realize that it's saving life is the most important thing. So those are just a few points to add.
Yeah.
Thank you both very much. Those are both very, very important points. I just want to say that, as I am a early teen Sabbath school teacher right now, and our topic for this week is on substance abuse and making good decisions. So these Sabbath school lessons really are touching on topics that I probably didn't face when I was that age, but our children are having to face. So I want to preach alongside with you, Tracy, and saying, please re-engage with those Sabbath schools. And Bill also put a link in the chat to some middle school resources, so please click on that. I'll also say a little bit earlier, I put in a link to the Family Ministries directory of counselors. So you can go there to find counselors as well. You can you can also select to find Adventist counselors there. So there are definitely resources here, and we certainly want to build more. We are hearing the need, and the North American Division is wanting to respond to all of the needs. But I will say it's not possible for us to do everything.
Yeah.
It is up to every single one of us to be the hope for
Yeah.
someone else.
Yeah.
So please share what you have learned, find the ways, and the Lord wants us to be the hope. He wants us to share hope with others. So he's going to help us in this. We're not in this alone. We have each other, and we have him and his retinue of angels to help us. But we do have to end here. And I am just really inspired that we have so much opportunity here. And I want to thank every single one of you again so much for being with us, for hanging in there with us. And we will continue to pray for you, and please pray for us as we continue to tackle the issue of suicide as well as mental health issues in general. And a huge thank you to Bill and Tracy and to our breakout room facilitators. You are the ones who make this possible, and also my assistant Phil for keeping us all running. Thank you all so much. Please feel free to join us at a future webinar. We hold these webinars once a month on the first Thursday of each month. So we look forward to seeing you in a future webinar, and please stay in touch with us if there's anything else we can do for you.